Please welcome to the Financial Brand Forum, Chief Experience Officer at Adrenaline, Mrs. Gina Bleedorn.
Hi, Vegas. How you guys doing? Yeah? I'm here to talk about branding today, not pontificating on what it is. I think most of you kind of know, but how it can build business success for growth. And with that, I'm going to show real stories of banks and credit unions that have grown because of what they did with their brand. We have, at Adrenaline, branded over 50 financial institutions in this country, some big, some small, all over, and some were just refreshes, some were entire name changes. And when I thought about what can I tell this group of people about what all of them have in common, what can you learn? It centers around this word, not just the literal act of changing, but the emotional reaction to the word. There was in every case some contingent of fearing change and embracing change. And in every case, when they got over the fear and moved to the embrace, they were able to achieve business success. And the faster they were able to do it, the more success they achieved. So I don't know all of you. I would like to, I think, maybe most of you. But you may be sitting here today because you are just curious. You're just thinking about change. You want to see what others have done. You may be here because your organization has already decided to change something with your brand, and you're looking for strategies on how to do it. Or you might be here because you have an inkling you need to make a change, but maybe others in your organization don't. And so in every case, what we always find is not everyone is in the same place in the organization along this spectrum. And so gaining that alignment is part of, hopefully, some strategies that you'll learn today. Because in every case, the change with brand enabled growth for these organizations. So brand can be a little abstract, maybe a little fluffy. So I'm going to start with what the banking industry loves, just hard numbers. These are numbers, about 4 billion to about 10 billion. And this line chart represents 151% asset growth in 7 years. So think about those kind of numbers. What would it be like to tell your shareholders or your board? How about those numbers? And this is the growth asset line of a bank that was here on stage with me at this event in 2017. Was anyone here in 2017? Yeah. And they had just rebranded. You see in 2015, that represents their assets. When they rebranded 2017, they were here, and look at the growth that's happened since. This bank started as Community Trust Bank in North Central Louisiana. They had grown to become one of the region's fastest growing, most well-respected banks. But as they grew from Louisiana into Mississippi and into Texas, they started to run into some confusion with their name. And in fact, in this 3-state footprint, there were over 230 other entities with community or trust in their name. And so name confusion became a real problem, and they didn't want to change at first, but they realized what could happen if they did. And when we got to know this bank, we realized when they said our culture defines our success, they really meant it. They have, and to this day still have, one of the most unique, strongest binding cultures of any organization I've ever seen. And that made them unique. And so through a process of strategy, research, dozens of names, ups and downs of legal availability, Community Trust Bank became Origin Bank. And Origin Bank is the center point from which everything begins, and the core of who they are is what makes them unique at the origin.
As we move into the future with innovative ideas built on the foundation of our core values, I'm pleased to announce that today we become Origin Bank.
When that launch and that video was completed, I mean, how your heart felt about this brand, you knew immediately that this brand change and what we went through was exactly what we needed to create identity that everyone bought into.
I mean, people were emotional. We had tears, we had applause, we had a lot of buy-in. That was the night that I've had the most pride of being associated with Origin Bank.
And as they launched, even in their beloved markets where everyone loved Community Trust, they said, we're the same. We're not changing who we are. We're just changing our name. And Lance Hall, who was the last person talking on that video, who since became the CEO, said, we look on the outside now like we are on the inside. And that's what good branding does. They went public a few years later on the NASDAQ. There's Drake Mills, the chairman, standing next to Terry Bradshaw, his Louisiana Tech buddy, on their board. Here he's a little crazy. And then over time, they just kept growing into this brand, expanding new branches, living and breathing it, exuding it in all they did, and then earlier this year made an acquisition to go from 7.5 to almost 10 billion. And they have been named by American Banker a top 3 bank to work for in the country in 2021 for the 9th consecutive year. And CEO Lance Hall and EVP Ryan Kilpatrick, just named a top Louisiana young banker, sitting right there. Let's give them a hand. And so, beyond just wanting to embarrass them, I wanted to tell this story because this is a beautiful bank doing incredible things, and that's why they're successful. But the change in their brand helped enable them to be the best they could be. A second story, numbers again. In this case, even more percentage growth, 166% in 4 years, shorter period of time. This is the growth line of a credit union who was lagging behind industry average growth. When we met them was 1.5 billion. This credit union was Kern Schools Federal Credit Union, founded in the 30s, and they were serving the school district employees. They started with deposits in a shoebox in a library at Bakersfield High School, and over time had started to grow, and they were beloved in Kern County, truly dominated the market there, but there was no more growth in Kern. And so their strategy was to grow up this area called the Central Valley, first in a 3-county expansion area, and then another 6 counties, in total 9-county expansion area. And this area of the Central Valley, as we got to know it and this credit union, there is this incredible pride of place, agriculture, energy, almond farming. It's the only place you can get cotton candy grapes. If anyone's ever had those, they're delicious. And we learned that this place was of the land and there was a pride in this place. And so we had to bring that out in the DNA of the brand we would have to create. And so Kern Schools Credit Union, Federal Credit Union, became Valley Strong Credit Union. And the word valley had jumped out in our research as something that had incredibly positive associations with the people of this place. And paired with strong, it became a compound word, one they could own. And a little bit about this mark that's unique. This is an emblem. An emblem is one of the earliest forms of branding, and we knew for these people we had to create a mark that looked like it had been there, not something new. And so this was a handcrafted mark depicting the valley, cradling it, hope with the sunrise, the unique architecture of the area. And so this mark felt like it was just them. And so they naturally accepted it. And the brand created around it would be very much of the land, and more importantly, of its people, hard-working people that believed in their communities and believed in themselves. They positioned themselves as having been in the valley so that they could expand into areas they hadn't actually been in technically, but their roots provided a mainstay. The brand came to life, a lot of natural colors, earth tones, forest greens, extended into patterns big and small. And the members who, out of all the brands we've launched, I did think there could be a small mutiny of angry members with this one. They really, really were, this was like an institution in Kern County. But when it did launch, and it was shortly right after COVID, the members embraced it. Because they got over that fear of change. They saw this is something good and this is something that feels like us. They position themselves against the big banks and advertising, multifaceted digital campaign. Grow Your Possibilities was the brand launch campaign, and the tagline, grow your dreams, grow your convenience, grow your future. A great example of brand launch advertising that's infused in the promise of the brand. Post-rebrand, Valley Strong named one of America's best credit unions by Forbes, #2 in California, and more importantly, their brand helped them actually accelerate their brand launch growth throughout the valley, throughout the Central Valley. Becky Swigum, there you are, marketing director for Valley Strong in the audience. And I love embarrassing people. I'm going to keep doing that, I think. So those are two examples of growth, Valley Strong and Origin, two different organizations, two different parts of the country, a bank and a credit union. But the point is that growth is imperative for everyone, and it's so imperative because of the competition. You've got, as of this morning, 4,690 banks in the country, and even more than that, 4,900 even credit unions. This number may have changed since this morning, but that's 9,500 institutions that are competing for market share with each other. And then you've got this little thing of fintechs. You might have heard a little bit about them. There's a whole track at this event dedicated to understanding this whole landscape. But last year, there was a 275% increase in the amount of people who said a non-bank was their primary bank. So that number jumped from about 4% of people to 15% of people by the end of the year. That's, kind of a lot. And so what you've got now is a shrinking area of clear space to stand out. It's becoming more and more difficult. National banks, they've got the lion's share of the market share. Regional banks are consolidating and getting bigger. The community banks, credit unions, 1,000 of them, the fintech, it's getting hard to stand out. But one way to do that is with brand. Brand is business. Brand as business is a way to differentiate. There was an Edelman study last year that said businesses have now become the most trusted institutions in this country, more than government, more than media, more than nonprofits even, businesses. And so if businesses are governing society and brands govern trust around business, brands have never been more important than they are today. Steve Forbes is one of the many business geniuses who have long said, that brand is not just a thing, it's the thing that matters for your business, and Interbrand has proven over decades that strong brands drive growth. They consistently outperform the market, and increasingly so. In fact, their newest report, if anyone's seen it, just came out. They said that this past year had the fastest brand value growth on record, meaning brands are even more important. Post-COVID, there was a new acceleration of rebranding because everyone had to figure out how they stood in the new world. 75% of companies, 75 globally, repositioned or refreshed their brand since COVID in some way, shape, or form. Brand matters, and the gap between strong brands and weak brands is increasing. Now, there is a methodology in branding called Blue Ocean Strategy. Anyone heard of it? Yes, Blue Ocean Strategy the premise is that in the red ocean, everyone's saying and doing the same thing. People are fighting for market share, and the ocean becomes bloody with competition. But in the blue ocean, they are learning how to say something in a different way. Bank original, grow your possibilities. Suddenly, you can transcend competition, make them irrelevant, have a measurable loyalty, and propel growth. And in banking, it's a little hard to do that because you can't become the next Uber. You can't innovate too much or you won't be insured by the FDIC or the NCUA. So how do you stand out? Most financial brands today are kind of in this red ocean. So let's look at some of them and some names. And if any of your logos are on any of these slides, please do not become angry with me. But and these are just names and logos. Brands are far beyond that. But just looking at names, we've got 109 schools credit unions, showing about 15 of them here. We've got another 100 teachers credit unions, so over 200 schools or teachers credit unions can be limiting. There are 231 First National Banks. So they all became the First National Bank of whatever their community was, and that's great, and here's like 40 of them, and half of them have shortened to acronyms. Just FYI about acronyms, they don't fix the problem. If they do have less letters, so I will give you that. But you can't own them when there's nothing generic, something generic behind them. Not that helpful, it can actually make things worse. So here are the top 20 names of banks today. There's about 3,800 instances of these names. And here are the top 20 credit union names. There's about 2,500 instances of those names. Some have more than one. So when we look at this list in totality, what we've got is a lot of potential business limitation. Some of it is geographic. So you've got something county, something area, something city, which is great unless you want to move outside of that county, that area, or that city. On the credit union side, the obvious one, you've got seg names, become a barrier when you want to move outside of the seg, and then the remainder are what we call generic names. And this means they're so common that nobody owns them, and this is especially prevalent for the banks, on the bank side. And they often are not deemed to be a problem until they become a problem, because if you have a generic name and you try to move somewhere where someone else has that same name, common law rights prevail, they sue you and you can't go. So that could be a problem there. Now let's look at logos and still keep picking on the banks for a minute. We've got a lot of eagles. It's good, America. We've got trees, specifically this oak tree looking tree. We've got a lot of stars, especially in Texas. Everything has a star in Texas. And so again, a lot of these brands, they emerged before the internet. So you didn't have to look different. And by the way, you didn't necessarily want to. In fact, there was a term coined by a management professor specifically regarding bank names and logos called symbolic isomorphism. Use that tonight at the bar. Symbolic isomorphism. It means the tendency of organizations to adopt names and identities similar to their competition in order to exude legitimacy. Makes sense, and especially in banking, it's, a place you want to feel safe and legitimate. Now let's look at the credit unions. We can't leave you guys out. You also have eagles, trees, the same oak tree, and stars. And the point here is it's about so much more than legitimacy today. You cannot just be legitimate and stand out. People's brand sophistication and their expectations are through the roof. They're aligned with the best brands they see every day. And so the brands behind the name and logo, that's what matters. And these are just, they are your most powerful brand signals. And so now, a few examples of brands that we've elevated up and out of the red ocean into the blue ocean. So you get the idea. I could keep this going, but I'll just have it fade out here. The point in some of these, some of them were same names, some of them were multiple brands, consolidating brands, but all of them were needing to create new relevancy. They were needing to connect in a new way. They all needed a new strategy, a new story, and a new experience. So as you consider brand changes for growth, you don't necessarily need a new name. You may not even need a new identity, but what you do need to do are these three things. You need to stand out, you need to connect, and you need to deliver. So, a little more about each. Let's start with standing out. Standing out is not about irreverent advertising necessarily, or crazy colors. Standing out is actually just about strategy. Smart strategy to find a clear space, position yourself in it in a way that can connect with who you want to connect with. That's how you stand out through strategy. And really, it's a mixture of art and science coming together, beginning with an example of a story. These are the Lukens Steel workers in the greater Philadelphia area. Lukens Steel is the steel that built the Twin Towers. And the credit union was formed to serve these guys and their families. And this credit union was Citadel Credit Union. And what you can see here is that they had a strategy they called deliberately ambiguous. So, the credit union part was hidden. They actually thought, because of people's perceptions of credit unions, it was better to pretend to maybe be a bank. But even as the CMO himself said, driving by this building, it could be a bank, a credit union, or a school of wizardry. Who's to know? And so when you don't even know if you're a financial institution, you're not even in the consideration set. But this credit union was a $5 billion credit union. So they were not small, and they had grown with this strategy. But actually, when we met them, brand was at the top of their strategic plan. So this was brand as business strategy. And so in that convincing spectrum of change, we could start ahead because we didn't have to get everybody on board. They already were. So we went right into the data part, the research, where you're mixing good thinking that comes together with the science of creativity and positioning, and we found out that people in their area were actually very welcome to the credit union process. 2 of 3 were interested in it, and the credit union density in this area was lower than the national average, so being such a big credit union, they were in quite an advantageous position to capitalize on being that. So they brought back the idea of credit union and brand position. This is the singular unification idea that all inputs lead into and everything that comes out of the brand comes out of. And for Citadel, it was building strength. Building the strength of buildings that or how they came to be, but building strength moving forward in people and communities. This was their new logo mark, exuding building strength. This is a modern Citadel, which means fortress of strength. It has forward-moving momentum, beautiful colors, texture, depth. And so Citadel, wizardry or whatever, became Citadel Credit Union, loud, proud, and nothing ambiguous anymore. Like our members, we're the strength that moves ahead. This was another COVID launch. And they decided to push through with their membership. Photography style, photojournalistic, even this is meant to depict people building strength in their own lives. And look at how brand pattern and texture starts to interact with people and subjects in photography. Again, really trying to frame, support, and empower them. Crops of the logo. Visually, it's appealing, but deeper than that, it has meaning. Even in something like plastics, you can see how this brand is coming through successfully and beautifully. Down to their digital channels, same thing. And digital, it's more important than ever to humanize and bring your brand into your digital. Building strength together became their new tagline and the brand campaign that launched in the middle of COVID. They won awards for how this campaign connected them to the community and all the work they did in the community. To here's their branch again, their signature branch designs, now clearly labeled as credit unions, and then all their marketing that followed. If you want to see a great example of a brand done well by an internal team after it's been launched in a year and a half since, look at Citadel Social. Kudos to these guys and how they've extended this brand. 90% post-launch internal positive feelings for the new brand, and we think they're just getting started. Thing number 2, connect. Connect through story. And a minute on stories. These are not just what you read your kids at night, trying not to fall asleep. Stories are real. They actually make people do things. And that's because we make, as humans, 95% of our business decisions based on emotion. And because of that, stories resonate. And in fact, if people love your story, over half of them are more likely to transact in the future. Nearly half will share your story with others. And 22 times more people will remember you. That's what stories do. This bank, American Bank, needed a story. Very badly. Wonderful, amazing people, but needed a story. And so you can see here, they had multiple divisions, investments, trust, insurance, but they also had multiple brands because they were doing acquisitions, and some of them had been converted, others were kind of lingering. They didn't know what to do with it, and so they had to make a decision. And as we got to know this bank, located in the northern plains, North Dakota and Montana, we found out the values of both their customers, people in the market, and even employees at the bank. Future-focused, pioneering, empowering, growing, pathfinding, gutsy. And so that, among other things, led into their new position of finding new ground, which was gutsy in and of itself, as was the decision they made. Credit to CEO Dave Ailes, who not only helped lead the way of, by the way, in the spectrum of change, not everyone was in the same exact place. And so we had to, as often we do, get alignment. And so they decided not only to change from their multiple divisions and their multiple brands into a single brand, but decided that as a non-ownable name, not a limiting one, but a non-ownable name, they were going to create a net new name. And so that new name became Brevera Bank. This is what it looks like, and this is how it was launched to employees.
There comes a time when the only way forward is through change. Taking that first step on a new path takes courage and conviction. It takes grit, heart, resiliency, and it takes everyone. Yet there's also something thrilling about change. It frees us from the everyday routine. It gives us permission to do something new, to go where none of us have gone before, to discover that we can take flight and find new ground. Today, we join together as employees and owners to welcome a new era of banking, one where the early risers, the big thinkers, the mountain movers, and the visionary dreamers all come together to forge a new path ahead. Today, we welcome our employees, our customers, our families and friends to a change over 100 years in the making. Today, we welcome you to Brevera Bank. As we continue to grow and add new locations to our family, it only makes sense to introduce a new name and logo that unifies our network across North Dakota, Montana, and beyond. From small towns to larger cities, from the wide open plains to the rugged beauty of the mountains, from family farms to energy fields, to the people building businesses and lives in our communities, Brevera is powered by the energy of all those it serves, with a footprint that reaches far and wide, with a focus always on our people.
In case you're saying, Gina, remember that time you made fun of eagles and there's an eagle there? This is a good example of they wanted to connect, their old logo had an eagle, they wanted to connect with their heritage, but this is done in a way that is ownable, that's different, it's an insignia. They're using colors of dark brown and chocolate brown and gold that are very unique. And so this, even though the symbolism itself is based on what their old symbolism was and what many others have, it's depicted in a completely different way. And their new division brands that were and are a huge part of their business were now unified. There was a big celebratory launch. We got past COVID enough to do this in person, and they launched with pride to all their employees. They had the story to go with it to inspire their employees to become brand ambassadors, which they did. They launched to their customers in their mailboxes, in their inboxes, in their wallets, and you can see how beautifully it extended, and they told a new story that mattered, inclusive of going digital with that story and humanizing digital, and a campaign, a Forge Your Path campaign that was in all forms of advertising and media, and all of those video images you saw and all of these pictures are custom to them, shot in their community, in many cases with their customers, with their employees. This is completely ownable, and it's yet another depth, not stock. It is another depth of unique, genuine storytelling that they were able to leverage in media down to digital banner ads and social. And then in their branches, from the inside to the outside, and by the way, your signage is the most expensive form of your logo, which your CFO will remind you of. And so it is important to get that right. And so for our clients, we stay very involved in this process to do justice, to make sure we are maximizing the brand. These almost look Photoshop, but they're not, they're real. They look so impactful. And the CEO, Dave, saw me a few weeks ago and said, Gina, everyone tells me they see Brevera everywhere now, but we're in the same places we were before. And so that's a testament to good branding. And Kelsey, yes, there you are. Kelsey Dahl is the marketing manager at Brevera. This brand wouldn't have happened without her blood, sweat, and tears. for Kelsey and Bravera. All right, I think I'm done embarrassing people, but I don't know. I may still keep going. So the third and final, deliver. Deliver through experience. And here's a story about that. Park National Bank. We met Park here in Vegas at this event. And Park was a $10 billion bank, or it is, 120 branches. Park was a bank built on delivering promises to their people, to their communities, and to all the banks they acquired. They actually, even though they were consolidated under the same charter, allowed all of these individual banks to keep their names, and they believed that was the right strategy. They didn't realize it was actually to their own detriment, to the detriment of their own customers, to the detriment of their staff. They were literally competing with themselves. This is showing all of their overlap. It's funny now, it wasn't as funny at the time. We had some big hurdles to overcome, but they really were. They had fiefdoms that existed in name only, that weren't to the betterment of the people they were trying to serve. Someone wouldn't realize I can go to an ATM even though I'm 2 hours away from home because it's an affiliate. And some of these brands were dominating in market share, 60% or more, some of them in their markets. So there was, the change spectrum on this one was really broad. There was some people that truly did not believe assimilating was the right move. So we went to strategy and we went to research. And one of the things we found was, and this was shocking to them, but I think this is applicable industry-wide, they found that 43% of people, businesses and consumers, would rather bank with a national bank that's not involved in their community, they didn't care, as long as they were national. Another 46% statewide. That is nearly 9 of 10 people who preferred at least a statewide bank in scale for perceptions of convenience, which is the #1 driver of acquisition in banking. So only 12% wanted a county bank, which is how they had positioned themselves up until this point. And so through a process of a lot of hard work, they were able to, and courageously, change 100 years of tradition, those leaders, by deciding to rebrand under a single name. And this is part of their brand manifesto, past to present, generation to generation, leading to their brand promise of serving
Park
more.
National is a family. Community banks bound by everything that matters most. By the way we serve our customers. By the way we show up for our communities. By our compassionate approach and unwavering commitment to businesses. By our love of neighbors and neighborhoods. Together, under a single name and banner, our family proudly shares who we are, who we've always been, and how, together, as one, we can serve our customers and communities more.
You either love to take care of people or you don't, and it's naturally a part of our culture is to take care of people.
They went on to have multiple people at the bank give testimonies, from tellers to senior leadership.
Sometimes we are making decisions that are great for a customer that financially at that moment might not be the best for the bank, but we're still going to suggest those anyways because that's how we do business, and long term that's how we're so successful.
We let our actions speak for themselves, and I think it is noticed, and we don't do it to get the business, we do it because it's the right thing to do.
We're going to have the same people doing the same thing, serving their customers as they have before. Unify the brand message, we want to serve people more, and unify under one uniform. One name, one logo, one store.
At Park National Bank, we're committed to bringing you the best we can and providing a banking experience where you mean more.
And as they launched, many of the naysayers or people that were against it, especially a lot of regional presidents and leaders, they realized this was the best thing, and they could come together under a brand as business to create a better experience and deliver more, literally, to everyone. And as that new brand came to life, it was community impacting, and it was a rally cry of togetherness, a way of brands this is especially a nice upgrade here. This is a way of refreshing your physical presence. Again, it's your most expensive thing. Make sure it's working for you. Have your brand as a billboard at your branches, and a rebrand can be an ideal way to do that, both inside and outside. And then a campaign that is live now, What Means a Lot to You Means a Lot to Us, where we created docuseries of the bankers and their customers, profiling small business customers in their lives, showing how Park Bank made a difference for them because the bankers really cared.
People pay you back, not numbers. People. And you have to have faith in the people.
Ultimately, this campaign brought to life this promise of serving more in all of their markets and is enabling them to now achieve acquisition and market growth with their brand, on top of the brand alignment and internal growth that they could not have achieved without it. The chairman and CEO, an incredible man, David Troutman, said they have now a sense of unity and purpose that they have not had in years, and that required for them an upheaval of change. But they went from being terrified of it to embracing it, and that has made all the difference. So in summary, to grow, your brand must stand out through strategy, whatever strategy that's right for you. Find it, capitalize on it, build a brand around it. Connect through story. Stories move people to action. And deliver through experience. Ultimately, people remember how you made them feel. That's through the experience they have with you. And back to that idea of change. Change is gonna keep happening. And in fact, they say we're about to change more in the next 50 years than we have in all of humanity from the beginning of time. Change is perpetual and increasing. So, if you remember nothing else that I've said today, remember not my words, but those of the late but great Jack Welch. Change before you have to. So, thank you very much. Come find me or Adrenaline if you have questions or want to talk more, and enjoy Vegas. Thank you.